JJ, the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Hey, I want to cover for you page 1 of the SBA application for forgiveness. Now, this would apply to employers because this is related to the payroll for your employees. Hey, and if you don't mind, if you are listening after this, then I must be providing you some good information. I'd love if you'd hit subscribe. But what I want to cover here is what's the alternative payroll covered period. I've got it up in front of me. It's on page 1. And what is that? So when you're trying to include the payroll that you had in the payroll cost of the application for forgiveness on the Paycheck Protection Program, you look at it and you're like, okay, I got 56 days, right? It's 8 weeks, 56 days. So how do I fit the payroll in there? This alternative payroll covered period makes it easy for those that would do either weekly or bi-weekly payroll. So what's very specific to this though is that you would take what date you got your PPP funds, right? So that disbursement date, that's when your 8 weeks begins. That's when your 56 days start. So obviously you're going to be in some kind of payroll period, right? You get your money here, okay? You're in a payroll period. So what this indicates is at the beginning of the next payroll period, following the date of disbursement, you can use that as your start date for payroll, right? So that would be now 8 weeks of payroll, right? So if it's bi-weekly, obvious, right? That'd be 4 payroll periods. If you're doing weekly, then that'd be 8 payroll periods. So it's a way to just kind of line up, okay? You don't get to go back very clearly. So in the example here, it says, if you get your loan proceeds on April 20th, which is a Monday, and the next payroll period begins on April 26th, then you would start the payroll cost considerations on the April 26th for 8 weeks. So it definitely makes it easier. I'm bi-weekly payroll guy, so that's going to work well. If you're a 1st and 15th or you do something else, then you'll just need to do what's called the covered period, where you're literally going to have to pluck out of your payroll the payroll that is from the date of disbursement 56 days. So you just have to look, which isn't that big a deal. I mean, in the sense, it just requires a little bit more calculation and pulling the numbers out. The bi-weekly, the weekly just makes it easier to come up with those numbers, easier to provide it. A couple of things to note on that is that this would be the only thing that I'm seeing where you can use an alternative covered period. So this would not change if you're using the alternative covered period for payroll. That has no bearing on the other costs that you're paying for, the rent, the utilities, right? That still needs to be in that time period. Now, the employee retirement match, the SUTA, okay, that's going to line up with your alternative payroll period, right? So your payroll costs would be all the alternative, but then your other costs would not be. It would just fall into that. And you're going to see that basically it's just including 2 months worth is really what it's going to come down to. So with that being said, I think it does make it easier. That's on page 1. It's the alternative payroll covered period. This has, again, nothing to do with the self-employed because they don't have employees that they're paying. They don't have W-2 wages unless you are a self-employed individual that has paid or does pay wages to employees. Then, of course, you're following this. But as it relates to your self-employed PPP amount that you got, right? That line 31 divided by 52 times 8. This doesn't have anything to do with that because that's just an automatic amount for you as self-employed. So if somehow that confused you, all I'm trying to say is that this alternative payroll covered period only applies to payroll, as in W-2s, to employees that you are paying. And I do think it makes it a lot easier. You can find this application on my website, jjthecpahelp.com. I've got a link down below. No booby traps. But hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me.